Welcome back to the Self-Esteem and Confidence Mindset podcast with me, Johnny Pardo. Today, I welcome Corinne, where we're going to be talking about self-confidence, surviving to thriving, and many, many more topics today. So just an introduction to Corinne, and then we'll dive in today. So Corinne is an inner peace warrior, freedom finder, and emotional wellness champion. She is an expert in self-love, forgiveness, and breaking childhood trauma cycles. She also empowers women to shift from surviving to thriving. So welcome to the show today, Corinne. Glad to have you on here. Yeah, first of all, might be really useful to hear a little bit about what makes you so passionate about this area and really helping women with these particular challenges.
Well, some of it comes from simply being a mom, the journey that I went through as a mom. A lot of it goes back to just childhood too. So the childhood I grew up with compared to what I wanted to have for my children, what I envisioned. And then the residuals, if you will, of my childhood that spilled into my ability to parent. I lost my dad and my brother both to substances. So I lost my dad 17 years ago. And at the end of this month, it'll be 12 years since I lost my dad or my brother. And so this journey really is about teaching people about how to love themselves and where does that stem from, understanding their emotions, and really having a good whole health perspective. So the passion for serving women comes from being a woman myself and relatability, knowing that women, are going to raise up that next generation of young people, that we have connections, to the young people. So that's why I focus on women.
Awesome. Well, thank you for sharing your story a little bit, and perhaps a couple of the close situations or close family members that that there's obviously been a challenge for you. So we talked a little bit about childhood, or you kind of touched on it a little bit, and particularly in my own journey, digging deep, and it's continual work I'm doing, going into those childhood events and actually looking at maybe where some of those losses or maybe mini traumas or bigger traumas, and how they've impacted me later. From we talk about childhood trauma. Is there can be quite a lot to dive in. So is there a starting place you would guide someone to look at when they're trying to look back at their childhood and look at maybe some of these challenges?
I think what's really important about trauma and looking back at your childhood is to really see that the people that raised you were operating from their highest level of awareness. We can project the blame out, because we're hurt, right? We're wounded, right? We have a child inside of us that's wounded, and we've been through different types of traumas, right? There's all kinds of traumas. But forgiveness is really a big piece of it, is forgiving them, and just recognizing that you can separate the being from the behavior, right? I can love the person and not like the behavior. And that gives you a certain level of peace. But when we start really looking at childhood trauma, and specifically if I look at what they call an ACEs score, so adverse childhood experiences, there's a list of 10 things that you can take on this little quiz. And in the state of California, they implemented that it's given at the pediatrician's office. So there's 7 things that if you've experienced this, the higher your ACE score is, the more physical things you may see wrong with your body. And so understanding ACEs, understanding what childhood trauma physically does to your body was very important to me. My ACE score is a 7 out of 10. And what I was looking at was, how do I heal me? So forgiveness was a big piece in learning to love me, right? Because when we receive a lot of criticism or different chaos is going on, we can perceive that it's somehow our fault. And I needed to heal my relationship with me. First is, the most important piece. But my body was always in this perpetual state of fight or flight. And that is what can cause the long-term issues with health. So in autoimmune disease, we can see congestive heart failure, asthma. There's a whole host of them, a whole host of things that can come up. But from on the outside, I'm like, oh, my life is great and everything is great. And then the doctor was like, well, that's not what your blood work says. Your blood work says you're under a great deal of stress. So looking to heal that was a really big piece of why I was looking at trauma in and of itself, right? So forgiveness, self-love, working with the whole body and healing literally from the inside out.
Yeah. I really value what you said about, in particular, like the forgiveness and separating the human behavior from the being. I've got one teacher I listened to, and it's called Peter Sage, and he always looked his in a couple of his programs, the way he looks at like forgiveness is like the strength that you've got out of it as well, like that you've been able to develop, which I thought was a really interesting for giving me this strength. Forgive, but
Right.
obviously in the moment it's not always easy.
Right. It builds resilience, right? Because as I'm looking to continue to better myself, and we all have wounds in, to various degrees and things that we've been subjected to. And, they even title, big T, little t, as far as trauma. And, going through the things I did, like losing my dad, losing my brother. And then I lost my mom almost 2 years ago to cancer, and my best friend a few months before that to cancer. And so seeking what was the gift from their life, what did they leave for me? What did I learn about them from them? And even, like when I look back at, I had told you before, I've been on this journey for 22 years. And the first phase of my journey came from me having a breakdown and me, sitting on a bathroom floor sobbing and wanting to take my own life. And a lot of that was because I was trying to be somebody that I wasn't. I was trying to live up to an expectation of, what I perceived that society wanted me to be as a mom, as a wife, as a woman. And once I started taking off all the masks I was wearing, the joy started to come, right? Once I started to, my thoughts, change those around, right? And start focusing on and energetically sending to myself the love, understanding, why am I feeling the way I'm feeling, and addressing it instead of eating, because I wasn't really good at stuffing my emotions with eating. But there were gifts. So when my dad died, I started down a path of really understanding, just how people learn differently, why people behave the way they do. But when my brother died, because that one was like, just really blindsided. And I wanted to understand why people go through addiction. And that really set me down on this path. I wanted to understand why do people harm themselves with chemicals? Why do they drink too much? Why do they take pills? And it started to come to this circle of, they didn't love themselves, right? And because then when they didn't love themselves and something would happen, they would do something destructive to themselves. But then in that destruction, there was a wave, right? It rippled out, right? So they were hurting the people that they love. And then when they realized they were hurting the people they love, then they would hurt themselves some more. And it can just continue this vicious cycle. And one day I was like, why am I not an addict? Why was my brother an addict? Why was my dad? Why am I not? Why is my sister not? And then one day it was like you start to learn, right? So my drug of choice was sugar, like food I would eat, or I would watch mind numbing TV. I would, that was how I was stuffing my emotions instead of dealing with things, instead of really looking at what needed to be looked at. So it just like the gift in their lives was me loving me more and understanding, and then wanting to take that out to the streets, if you will, and to help other people understand how they can help themselves out of these kind of dark places.
I really value what you said about different types of addictions, because when like we hear the word addiction, I know like sort of growing up, when I would have heard the word addiction, it would have been like, oh, maybe an alcoholic or addicted to drugs, or like now and then actually, even though it's legal, obviously smoking's an addiction, but actually there's other addictions. There's like food, there's like sex, there's TV, there's social media is an addiction. It's all sorts of addictions, right? So yeah, like I really like the way you recognize yours was food. I know Tony Robbins, even the great man himself, said his was to a point eating a lot of food as well.
Right, because it's like, what am I doing to soothe myself? And here's the difference, right? It's like, we're not talking about the person that goes out and has an occasional drink. We're not talking about having a piece of cake to celebrate a birthday.
Yeah, sure.
Right? We're talking about specifically that instead of taking a look inside, right? I say pop the hood, instead of looking under the hood to say, why am I feeling, why am I reaching for this, right? Why am I doing this? That's what I got really curious. I started to investigate. It was like, what's happening here? What am I really feeling? What was the thought that preceded it? Right? Because the thought caused the feeling. It's my responsibility now. It's not anybody else's. Within my circle of responsibility are my thoughts, my feelings, and my actions. Those are all on me. And it was so much easier when I could just be like, well, you made me and it made me and this made me, and I could project that blame outward. It was a lot easier. But when you start to really look around, negativity is contagious, right? Negativity can be that go-to, right? It's I can push my poison out onto you. I can spew it onto you. I can go out and all the different ways you can get hooked on to something instead of addressing what's happening inside of you. It's a lot that you can do.
Yeah, certainly. And I can certainly relate to just, or even work's another addiction. It's like people put their head away in like work and things like that. And
it's hard some days, right? But when I tell myself it's hard, it is always going to be hard, right? So I look at it and think, I got this. I can do this. I can face this, right? And I find myself using the neuroencoding tools on myself, right? I'm going to stop, just stop. Tell myself that, stop doing that. Stop thinking that. Why are you letting that poison infect you? And when it comes to the family portion of it, right? So when we look back at our childhood and we think about the wounds, right? We can believe that it was intentional. It's like they intentionally did those things and they were just vicious and awful. But if you take a step back and look at what did they have going on that cause this, right? Not that it justifies it, because I would never be like, oh yeah, that it justifies it. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying, can you see the human behind the behavior, right? Can you see that we all do stuff that isn't necessarily it's not the kindest thing, especially when we're in a triggered moment, right? So I'm triggered, in and out of a reactionary state. I say things that I don't mean. I do things that I regret. And in those low places, then we want to feel better. The brain wants to feel better. It wants to hit a dopamine. So you eat the sugar, you drink the drink, you watch the show, you do the thing to get that quick release of dopamine, when it was probably be better if you just go out for a 30-minute walk, or put your feet in the ground and ground yourself and let that negative energy get absorbed out of you. There's lots of things that we can do that give us a nice slow drip of dopamine as opposed to that quick fix.
There's and a couple of things like you've been saying, like to understand where someone else comes from. I always feel like I need like that. I've had to develop almost, I don't know about you, but that high level of awareness of someone else, because it's quite easy for us just to be reactive human beings, but it takes a step back sometimes and a realization. It also sounds like you've developed a real strong self-awareness and being able to catch yourself. Okay, my thoughts going down that way. I mean, just to share a little bit what I do, like I work personally with a one-to-one somatic coach going deep into the body as well, because that was like one area I was missing. And like we did something where I went through and it's like, okay, I'm feeling this emotion and that's what's caused it. Where's this coming from? What do I need right now? It's like, actually, I might have a very upset little child inside that's been hurt from, someone's maybe rejected me or said something rejecting, but he's very hurt from his childhood, of whether that's losing my brother, like I lost a brother as well, or losing another relative. And he's like really hurt. And it's actually comes back to that. What's he need right now? Actually, it's not about the other person necessarily, but he needs a hug, even if that's hugging myself and then some kind of tool.
I love that. I use a technique I'm trained in, and it's called RAMP, and it's rapid accelerated mind patterning. So taking, people who have experienced, like the child wound, and taking them into that subconscious, down into the theta brain wave, and getting them to go back and do the child work, right? Give the child a hug, right? We can't erase somebody's memory of it, but we have the ability to lessen the vibration of it so that it doesn't have such an impact on us emotionally. So when you can talk about something that happened to you before, and you can speak to it without it being an emotional mess, so I've done obviously a lot of work in it, as you have. So when you lose the people that you love, and you lose them in ways that, because you don't have any control over that, right? And as humans, we want control.
I'm dreadful with the control element. Yeah.
Right. We want to be able to fix things and make things better. But when you lose people, abruptly, it's that creates this big gap in your life. And when you can finally speak to that without breaking down, that's a really big deal. I mean, for me to be able to talk about my dad and my brother, it's a big deal. Now, my mom, sometimes, I'm still going to cry when I'm talking about her. It's still pretty raw, but that's really cool that, just dropping into your body. I'm a big believer in healing from the inside out, and getting in touch with your soul, whatever you want to call it. But I believe it's a soul, and then what's inside of you, and listening to that voice. What does it need? Maybe it is that hug for the child inside of you. Maybe right now I'm feeling like I'm not being seen, right? You get kind of curious as to, why is that happening? But really, when you get curious about you, it does make you start looking around, and you're like, like, I wonder what happened to them that they're so angry, like at the line in the grocery store, and the person in front of you is really short with the cashier, and I mean, I see this often around the holidays. And so now, instead of being judgmental, I get curious and I think, wow, like, wonder what's going on, that they're so uptight right now, that they're so angry. There's something in there going on. And that's kind of the way I look at people now, I think.
Yeah, I love that, the curiosity element. It's not always, it takes practice, right? It's like you naturally want to judge and be like, and like one thing I learned is like, we're never not going to judge. It's always, that's kind of the brain. It's just about like kind of how quickly can I change my thoughts in those kind of moments, or question it or get a bit more aware. I found, so that's always interesting.
Yeah. And I just really think too that like people have, I mean, I had this like thought come to me once. I was at a convention and I was looking around and I'm looking at all the people and I'm thinking, everybody has some sort of wound.
Yeah.
There's like everybody has something that they're dealing with that when you're walking down the street, you don't know, like you don't know. So if somebody lashes, that's not about me. So when I quit taking things personally and I started looking around and going, that's not about me. That's not about me. How can it be about me? And I stopped taking anything personally because most of the time people aren't like, they're not focused on me. They're focused on themselves. So if somebody says something or does something hurtful, it's not about me. And I don't make assumptions. I don't pretend like I know what other people are thinking because I'm not a mind reader and I don't know. Right. So I like to ask clarifying questions. That works really well in marriage, just so you know. Right. Because if I make it about me, and that's often a question I ask in coaching is I'm like, what are you making it mean about you?
Great question.
Yeah, it's not about you. It's typically not about you, right? And then it's like, do I show up being my best self? Sometimes my best self is today I got up out of bed and I brushed my teeth and I pulled up my hair, and that's my best self today. Can I be okay with that? Sometimes that's the way life kind of rolls along, right? And just be comfortable with me. Sometimes when I'm talking, my mouth is a bit like a sailor's, and that's me. Sometimes I like to put makeup on and look, more put together. That's me too, right? And just get comfortable with who am I? What's my best self look like today? I don't know.
Being okay with that. Yeah.
Yeah, just being okay with it. Right? Life gets messy. We all make mistakes. We all got stuff. And just really, can I be okay with that? Can I accept other people? Just the way that. So
yeah. One final thing I just wanted to touch on, Corinne, was it's kind of going a bit back to what we were talking about earlier in the conversation, but it's going back to that fight or flight response. And I know you said it was like impacting on your health, and I've had quite a few conversations with people on that and been in getting into the whole somatic area, into like the breath work area. It's really intriguing and something I never thought about. Is there anything in particular that you found useful for perhaps getting into some of those feelings in the body that had been stored away? I know you've got a couple of techniques as well.
Yeah, oh, for sure. So breath work is great. So there's obviously you can YouTube tons of things like Wim Hof has really great breath work.
Oh, I do it every day.
Person that's it, I really like that personal relationship. I do a lot of things to balance energy. So I see a Reiki master. I see her once a month and go to the chiropractor. But as far as getting in restoring homeostasis within your body, meditation is one of the best things that you can do. Through the meditation process, they found that you can actually regrow the telomere, which the telomere is like the little shoelace cap, that little tip of the shoelace cap. It's the stop code for the DNA replication cycle. So in that, when it wears off, right, that's what can create an abnormal cell. So we need that cap, and it can be regrown through things like meditation.
Wow.
To restore homeostasis to your body, we want to calm the sympathetic nervous system. And it can, havening is something that can calm the nervous system. So you got hands on each shoulder. I am here, I am safe, I am me. Say these things to yourself in just 30 to 60 seconds, and it can soothe anxiety. It can help release the stress that's in your body. Right now, working to release, because my body just at night, my brain doesn't shut off. I went and I had my brain scan done, and it shows, right? I'm not relaxing when I go to sleep. So doing meditation before I go to sleep, taking a warm bath, scents. You want to make sure you have a dark room and it's cool, to help calm things. And reminding myself that I'm not in a space anymore that's unsafe. I haven't been for a really long time. I've been with my husband for 31 years, and so life is good, right? But telling that to the inside of my body is a whole nother story. So there's so many different ways that you can use to relax that nervous system, but it really is retraining. That's where the neuroencoding is awesome too, because it starts with the thought, and we want to calm ourselves, calm our bodies in reminding it that we're not living in that trauma, because every time you relive the trauma, it's as if it's happening again. So I like to share my story. I like to talk about my family, but I want to focus on what was good. What was good about that. I can tell you about all of the other stuff, but that's going to send my body back into fight or flight, right? I'm going to start to release lots of adrenaline, lots of cortisol, and it's a space I don't want to go into, so reminding yourself that it's not real anymore, and not talking about it. If you focus on the past, right, vibrationally, focusing on the past brings you down into a very low vibration. That's why when people are depressed, they're like, it feels heavy, right? It feels dark. They go inward, right? It's because from a vibrational standpoint, that's really what's happening within their body. When you're feeling things like joy and love, right? Your body's like, woo, there's a party going on there. And vibrationally, you're way up here, right? You feel light, you feel airy, because you really are. It stretched out the waves, right? Down, depression, ooh, heavy, and we go within, we start to curl up and go inside. I can tell you all kinds of stuff.
Yeah, lots of techniques and lots of ways, and just making sure you're connecting with you. I think it's the overarching message that we can get so busy and forget not to. So Corinne, thank you so much for sharing everything today. We could obviously go on for a lot longer, I know, in our conversation. But for now, where can the listener find you if they want to find out a little bit more about your work, or get in touch?
They can go to my website, which is just www.CorinneZuleger.com, or you can get me on Instagram is probably the best place. It's Corinne_Zuleger. And Facebook, you can find Corinne Zuleger Life Coaching on Facebook as well.
Awesome. Love it. So a massive thank you once again, Corinne, for everything you shared today. I've really enjoyed our conversation.
Thank you for having me, Johnny. I really appreciate it.
Of course. So that concludes our episode for today. And remember, you are in control of your own self-esteem and confidence.